We need to be able to look at people and say, I get what you're saying. Now, where does it say it in the Bible, what you just said to me? And then along that says, knowing that, then Jesus says, but also you do it by, the other thing is to look at the fruit of the person. In other words, the character of the person. That he's saying, these people are going to come in there looking like sheep, but you're going to pretty much be able to take a look. You can look at the difference between the poop of a sheep and the poop of a wolf, and at the end of the day, you can tell what they are. And so it is right here. He says, at the end of the day, they can say things, you're not sure, but look at their life. Is their life reflecting a life that is being transformed by Christ? Are you seeing the fruit in their life that Scripture talks about that we all will possess if we follow Christ? Because I can tell you it is impossible to be a Christian and a follower of Christ and yet opt out of transformation. You could say it, but you are not. Because if you have the Holy Spirit in you, that's what He does. And so you're going to look at things when it talks about the fruit of the Spirit. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. All of these things you can look at a person. And granted, you might look at a person and think, well, there ain't a lot, but I see it. It's happening. There are things about this person that they are less angry than they were before. That's a sign of fruit being produced. That they're more generous than they were before. That they have a heart for people than they did before. That they slow down to the guy on the street corner when you used to speed right by. I mean, it's progress. And obviously we continue to progress, and we look for that in our life. And that's what Jesus is trying to warn about. He says, if you were to obey me and you were to follow me, then that is you. That you use it to guard against the people around you, but you're not here going back to judging where, okay, they're a Christian, they're not, because I can see it. They're not saying the right thing, they're not living the right way. I mean, you use it to guard against, but ultimately it's about you personally. Am I speaking the truth when I talk? Am I living the truth in my life? Can people look at me and say, he has to be a Christian? Because I tell you what, I knew what he was like before. And there's no way he could have done it on his own. So he's got to have a higher power at work in his life. And Jesus, that's the challenge that Jesus says. To obey is to recognize that it's going to produce fruit in your life. And to be able to look for that fruit. John 15:5, Jesus says, I'm the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. It's like, and I hope you can bear fruit, or maybe you'll bear fruit, or the option to bear fruit exists. He says, if you will follow me and you remain in me and I in you, you will bear fruit. And so part of that belief is understanding and obeying is that it's a fruit we want to be able to have. As scary as it might seem, it's a fruit that we know we need to have in our life to live the kind of life that Christ called us to live. But then he goes on. So he's got the path. He's got this imagery of the fruit being produced. And then he goes on in verse 21. He says this. I shouldn't move my passages around. 21, he says this. Not everyone who says to me, and it's kind of tied into the same thing. It's not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only he who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and in your name drive out demons and perform many miracles? Then I will tell them plainly, I never knew you. Away from me, you evildoers. Here we see what Jesus is describing when we obey him. To be able to obey Christ is to seek a relationship that is personal. If there's anything you can learn when you look at this, because I understand that in churches, in general, we often focus on the outward behavior, and we often focus on the rules, and that can become excessive, to be honest. Not that any of them are necessarily bad, but for Jesus, it's about relationship. It's not about religion. The two might come together, but the focus in the relationship, or in being a follower, is the relationship. I mean, here, in this story here, Jesus describes, look, there's people that are going to go out, cast out demons, for Pete's sake. There's people who are going to be eloquent in speech. There's going to be people that you're charismatic, or you're going to think, man, I need to get his videos and his tapes, because that guy's incredible. Or that woman's incredible. There are going to be people out there like that, Jesus is saying. And yet some of them, on the day they stand before me, I'm going to say, man, I don't even know you. The word know in here, of course, is in a reference to personally know. You can have knowledge of someone, As an example, I've used it before. We all know the President of the United States. If you've read a book, you maybe know his history, you know about him. But I don't know if any of you guys have had him to dinner. Now, I might be wrong, but maybe you don't know him personally. You guys know about my wife, but you don't know her like I know her, or she knows me. That's the kind of knowledge, that's the kind of knowing that Jesus is describing here when he's describing about a person who obeys and follows, a person who wants to be in the kingdom and does the things, is a person who will know me personally. Intimately. I mean, that's a scary word for guys. Intimate. That's that's what he means. As guys, we got to get over it. That's what he means. You know? To follow Christ here always leads to a relationship. And it's important for us to be able to look at that and ask ourselves, can I say that I'm building a relationship with Christ? Or am I just going through the hoops? Am I making myself feel better by being here every Sunday, or tithing, or going out on the 30-hour famine, or going out at volunteering at Tracy Interfaith, or doing whatever? Do I use those things as a way to kind of make me feel like, look at me, I'm a giver. I do stuff. Or is every one of them an opportunity to say, in the process of doing that, I'm going to become deeper in a relationship that I have with Christ, because God is going to work through me in those situations. Totally different way to be able to view things and look at things. I mean, this verse is, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but when I first read it, it scares the bejeebus out of me, because it's like, what if I stood before him and he said, your name was what again? I mean, God, how do you spell your last name? Because I don't see it on here, you know? And we can use it in that way, but the reality is that, look, if you desire to love the Lord and know Him, I mean, that's good enough. Again, back to this narrow road and the journey that we have. It's about the heart, and it's about the willingness to be able to grow and to be able to want to know Christ, whatever process or however long that takes or however nervous that can be. It's the desire to be able to do that. It's obeying more out of a gratitude and a joy and a desire. It's a privilege to be able to be obedient, to be able to do the things we do. As hard as that can be sometimes, it's recognizing, to think God would want me to do that. To volunteer for God is like, what a privilege. As opposed to the obligation of thinking, well, I better do it because, people are looking, or I better do it because, I don't want God striking me with lightning, or that kind of stuff. That's the motivation, but it comes out of the heart. And so Jesus is saying, the third scene there, then is saying, not only is it this path as an example of when you obey me versus when you don't, or the fruit, but it's the relationship. That those who obey me are going to experience this relationship. Those who don't, they might do great things, but there's no relationship at all attached to it. And so be careful about that. And then the fourth one he wraps up with then is verse 24. It says, therefore, saying that, he says, therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine, puts them into practice, is like a wise man who built his house on a rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, the winds blew and beat against the house, yet it did not fall, because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears the words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against the house, and it fell with a great crash. And then just adding to this, it's not up on your screen, but when Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowds were amazed at his teaching, because he taught as one who had authority and not as the teachers of the law. Kind of the idea here Jesus is describing here in the obeying Christ is that we need to build on a foundation that is immovable. It's interesting because really in the analogy Jesus gives, he said, hey, there's two builders. They both have access to Home Depot. They pretty much get in line with the same materials. They, in their life, they do the same things, all of that kind of stuff. It's pretty much, if you looked at the two houses, it's kind of like a tract home. They got the same plans. They're two identical houses. Outwardly, can't tell the difference. But when the storm comes, then you're going to know. When the storm hits, he says you're going to be able to see which one is on the right kind of foundation and which one is not. Which one is immovable regardless of the circumstances of the storm in their life. Which one is going to come crashing down every time because of the way that they're being built and the way that they're living. And so he's saying, for those that obey me and follow me, they are people who are building it on a strong foundation. And here I should say that, we often think of foundation, well, it's on Jesus Christ, and that is true. But really, Jesus says the foundation is my words. This is the foundation Christ is talking about. When we build our life on the Word of God, when we build our life and frame our life, again, based on what does the Bible say, what does God call us to do, that's the kind of stuff that I want to be ingrained in the foundation of my life. Your life will be immovable. There is nothing the enemy can throw at you. There's nothing that the circumstances can hit you around you. There is nothing that can come in your life that's going to derail you when you build it on that kind of a foundation. Psalm 119, 165 says, "Great peace have they who love your law, and nothing can make them stumble." Now, I don't want to try to create, sometimes when I've talked in these life groups, I realize, I really should have explained myself better because, you can leave things unsaid. And I don't want anybody to walk away saying, well, you know what, I think I'm building on that, but this happened in my life and I'm miserable. Or I really wonder about God, or I question Him. That's not what I'm talking about. That's the narrow path journey where, life is going to be tough, and there'll be moments where you'll be challenged, and there might be moments where you feel knocked down. But the foundational faith that you have will stick through it. That regardless of whether you're in the place of feeling versus the place of believing, that your faith is still strong, and it's in there, even in the moments where you don't necessarily know it's there or feel it. But it's there. It's a foundation that cannot be moved, is what Christ is describing here. And at the heart of what's described there, when Jesus says that, is this idea of putting it into practice. That's probably, I would say, the challenge for all of us. Even in the context of baptism, I can think of multiple times where I've talked to people about being baptized who haven't, and they'll say, that ship has sailed. I'm a Christian now, so it's gone. I'm thinking, that ship's never sailed. That's unfinished business. It's like if you go to my desk, you see files set on my desk that have been there for 6 years probably that need to get done, but I never got to it. It still needs to be done. It's still there. Part of obedience is some of the things God's called us to is saying, we'll work on other stuff, but we're going to come back to that. Because at the very heart of what I've created in this relationship with you is that everything I have to say is on the table. Everything I've called you to do, you need to respond in obedience. Some of it seems insignificant, but it's a big deal to me because, and you will realize it's a big deal to you because it's an act of giving yourself to God and being dependent on Him. And you need to just do it. Some of it is a challenge where I know, for example, standing up, even doing this, the freakiness of it is being in front of all these eyes. And yet it's such a small thing to the moments in your life where God might put you in situations where you're in front of far more eyes than that, and it's really going to make a difference. And so we never know what God is planning to do, but so all we can do is respond with this attitude of obedience and being able to recognize this is what we're called to do. And so everything we come across when we see it's God's truth, we need to say, how do I apply that into my life? How did I make that foundational in the way that I live? What in my own life do I need to be able to set aside and realize that's my resistance to the boundaries, and recognize that I need to set that aside and live within the boundaries of what Christ has called me to live. And at the heart of this, maybe, or part of this, is verses 20 and 29, which I read. I kind of added this morning. That's my nature. But it's important because God wrote it. And one of the reasons is because when they responded to this sermon, the response wasn't like, man, that was really good, preacher. I'm going to go get a coffee mug and put a few of those things on it because I really like that. No, they listened to him and they said, man, this guy speaks with authority. This guy speaks as if it's his words. This guy's speaking as if he knows what he's saying, and I'm saying, thus saith the Lord, but it's like, hey, thus saith the Lord, this is what you need to do.